Everyone, welcome to Everything Teams Phone Live episode 74. And we have probably the biggest hitter of all the big hitters that join Everything Teams Phone Live on today, Mr. Tom Arbuthnot. Tom, welcome to episode 74.
Yeah, nice to be back. Good to see the pod flying. Flashy intros now. You got Bailey doing all the hard work.
There's sponsorship and a producer.
There is. I know. We've ramped it up since the last time you were on, Tom. I think it's been a few months. So.
There's just one thing missing. And I think, Tom, I don't know if it was your LinkedIn post or maybe Empowering Cloud's LinkedIn post about the branded Shure microphone, I think that I saw.
Oh, yeah. I've got them in the office. I've got four Shure mics all branded up. It looks really
Where's
good.
our branded microphone, Rick?
On my to-do list, I guess, now.
I could have a nice logo right here.
We're going to have to ping Shure. Logi takes care of us. Logi takes care of us for these little guys right here. But that's not a podcast Shure mic. We definitely need some of those so we can get the branding on there. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, they have some nice gear.
There we go. Speaking of branding, Bailey, is this a sponsored podcast today? Someone paying for this thing?
Absolutely. Well, first, thanks, Rick. Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm really looking forward to today's episode with Tom. You guys know this podcast is sponsored by Momentum, where we help businesses connect, collaborate, and engage using Microsoft Teams. And now back to episode 74.
I've heard of those guys.
Yeah, somewhere I've heard the name a few times. I'm not quite sure what they do. Tom, good to have you back. We know it's evening time for you. We're going to have a short, condensed version of this show. It's 45 minutes here today. But there's a lot to talk about in 45 minutes. I think we're going to cover, and Brandon, you can help me if I get some of this stuff wrong, but there's some cool thing out there called Places. We want to chat about Places a little bit with you, see what's going on with that, see what that's really meant for. I know there's some updates to Teams Phone. We'd love to hear what that looks like. And boy, what else is there? There's a Copilot Wave 2 that I keep hearing about.
Copilot news as well. There's plenty to talk about there.
All right. Well, Brandon, where should we kick things off? Let's get a good question to Tom, and then he'll just launch into it and give us all the updates.
Yeah, I'm curious. Let's start with Copilot Wave 2. It's not, as Microsoft says at their keynotes, when they do their keynotes for things like Cavell, it's like, AI first. So let's do AI first.
AI is the hot topic. So you're on message if you do the AI first. Yeah. So Microsoft had this big kind of announcement, kind of demo fest called Copilot Wave 2. And essentially, if you think about the original Microsoft Copilot was launched 18 months ago now, which has kind of gone fast. There's been 700 or over 700 updates and changes, 150 new features. This is across all the different Copilot scenarios. So Microsoft's kind of had Wave 2 as a kind of update as to new features launching and new capabilities. I think big picture, the interesting thing is they're moving pretty much everything to GPT-4o, which is the smarter OpenAI model. And they dropped in there in the future, they plan to leverage OpenAI 01. OpenAI's naming is ridiculous. So 4.0 is older than 01. 01 is this next generation of reasoning model. And for those not following deeply on the models, basically they've had quite a big step forward where a model can now try multiple outcomes and reason. So for example, if you gave it a crossword, it would start filling in clues and it might get so far along, then realize it can't complete it, and it's able to go back and start again. Previous models couldn't do that. So down the road, we're going to see even more intelligence in this open AI and kind of Microsoft Copilot technology. And then there's a whole lot of features we can get into as well.
Is that going to stretch across to things like Copilot Studios and things like that? Because you look at that and you go, I can see where reasoning comes into play when you start to build agents and chatbots and things that need sort of complex sort of problem solving.
Yeah, definitely. So it'll cover Copilot kind of knowledge worker scenarios, like, just doing stuff in Word, Teams, Excel, and in agents as well, where you might have, say you've got a SharePoint library with various different internal documents and you ask it a question, it could compare documents, like work out which is the best answer to give. It won't just, the way current LLMs work essentially is they're choosing the next most likely word. So once they go down a path, they're kind of locked on that path, whereas a reasoning model can try something and reset. And it takes longer to work it out because it tries multiple options. So there's kind of pros and cons there. But yeah, it will definitely span studio and custom agents as well as the kind of M365 copilots.
So I'm gonna ask you a question, Tom, and it's not really to do with the updates, although I'm gonna come back around and then ask probably a second question. In your day to day, as you're interacting with your, who you're consulting with, who you're working with from the enterprise space, how much are you hearing about, the strong adoption versus weak adoption of Copilot in the enterprise? Because I have my own opinion, but mine is probably more shallow than yours. So I'm just curious, like, how you see that adoption. And then the second fold, I guess, to tag the updates is, do you think Copilot, the wave 2, will help that adoption in any kind of magnitude?
It's an awesome question. That is like the question, really. So Microsoft are pushing this incredibly hard, right? They've kind of bet a large percentage of the company on AI is going to be a huge thing, and I think it is. However, their timeframes are quarter by quarter, and everybody else's timeframes are a little bit longer, and that speaks exactly to the adoption thing. Like, using AI is quite often a new way of working for lots of people, particularly if it's using a chat interface. It's not very natural for lots of users. So adoption is really tough. Like, you have to have multiple kind of sessions with people, and at the moment it's mostly forward-leaning kind of technology savvy people who are into it. The things that are landing super well are meeting recap or intelligent meeting recap. Like, everybody, if you look at the usage stats, gets that scenario. We all have too many meetings. We'd all love a quick summary. Like, that is instant value. Things like search is getting good adoption. So once you understand, you can ask questions, and you don't quite need to know if the file or conversation was in email or OneDrive or SharePoint or channels or wherever it was. That seems to be quite a popular use case. Obviously, things like coding, so Copilot and GitHub, massive success, right? Techies and coding, high value. When you get into other use cases, it takes some cajoling to get what you want out of it. And you kind of have people who say it was, Word or Excel or PowerPoint. Like, those are relatively early, I think. But you either have people who know how to do PowerPoint inside out and they're hardcore, and therefore they're like, I can do better than the AI, or they don't know how to use it at all, and the AI isn't yet good enough to be like, I don't really know what I'm doing, make me a deck. So it's a mixed bag. That the organizations that are doing it well actually did a panel a couple of days ago, last week for UC Expo, Monday, aren't we? And I had EY and Heathrow Airport on the panel talking about their adoption, and EY have gone like all out. Obviously, they have a consulting arm as well, and even though they are, a lot of users that are technical and kind of forward leaning, they've had to do really extensive adoption to get people involved. And yeah, to answer your question about adoptions, one of the announcements in Wave 2 is having this concept of pages where you can co-create and collaborate in a team mode with Copilot. And some of the other features are pulling data through across different Copilots. So, for example, authoring a document in Word and having Word able to read your emails, your meeting notes, your content. So it's starting to get better in terms of working across apps. But I still think there's a long way to go. Like, there's a big change in behavior to stop and think and drive an answer out of an AI beyond just document summary and meeting summary, which is a really big hit.
Yeah, that's sort of the basics, isn't that? Whenever you think of AI, whenever you think of adoption for Copilot, that whole translation, the transcription and the meetings. I mean, like the whole, take a Firefly, that was the original sort of that I remember in Zoom as an example, or Gong or whatever it was, right? Those are the kind of the OG sort of let me transcribe everything and make it something usable. So that is sort of the basic stuff but the use case is just far beyond that stuff, right? It's like, how do you start to document? Are you seeing documentation now of use cases that are quite specific that drive high value?
Yeah, I mean, some of the things that Heathrow and EY said was they found that they had like kind of train the trainer or champions that were in department that could talk to their peers about their use cases. So you're working in marketing, having someone else in the marketing org say, "This is how I drive value out of it." They said that was really good for adoption. The other thing you mentioned earlier, Rick, is line of business scenarios. Those are much easier for people to understand. I had this business process, and I had to grab data from here, here, and here, and I could drive an agent or a model to do it better. Those are really good because those are like, here's your scenario, here's your new workflow. You're basically going to use this new workflow. But if you say to a typical knowledge worker, like, here's a vague set of AI capabilities and here's your day, them jumping to how do I drive value out of that on their own can be challenging, evidently.
That's what I suspect. Yeah.
And I find, just personally, like I've been using Copilot for several months now. It's still a very conscious thought to think, okay, I need to go click on this button, I need to open this, and I need to prompt for what I'm looking for, versus it being kind of inlaid with my workflow, so to speak. Like you said, where it can reach across applications, it can help collate that data or make those suggestions for me. It's still very much a kind of a search or a command and conquer type tool, versus for me at least, versus that true assistant outside of things like, your intelligent recap and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's common, and yeah, remembering is a good way to think about it. Actually, it's like, I've got this document to produce, I've got a bunch of source material, I have to think about either throwing those files into Copilot and then starting a chat, or having them now. One of the updates is having them in OneDrive and being able to click multiple documents and summarize and compare. What we'll see over time is more multiplayer mode type scenarios. So Microsoft briefly talked about the idea of singular team Copilots, and that would be a Copilot that could join your project essentially. So think about it joining a Teams team, so it can see chat and channels and files. It would join your meeting. Theoretically, it could set up a planner, so it becomes like a PM or an assistant or a
Right.
kind of. And that's really interesting because that moves to the point where an individual is not going to the Copilot to drive some value. Actually, it's working within a team setting, and I think that'll be good for adoption because it's not an individual choosing to use it. It's more like this AI assistant is within the project, chasing, taking actions, following up. Like, that could be really big value, I think.
Mm-hmm.
The one piece that it seems to be, apparent, it's working its way into your workflow, right? Like right now, Teams is in the workflow, Outlook, your emails in the workflow, phone is even in the workflow, right? As Momentum, we added fax into the workflow. Copilot is working its way into your sort of daily workflow at some point, right? It's like that's really apparent that it's got to be embedded in your workflow. But those use cases, I think, become more and more important so that you can understand how to use them. I mean, that whole generic, I was hit with that whole, it can do all this stuff. And then I had it for a couple of weeks and I'm like, so what do I really need to use it for? Like, let's think about this. Like, how can I really use this? Right. Like Brandon said, it takes some thinking and some remembering to go.
Yeah, just like Teams did for a lot of us as well. Like, it's, again, working in chat and channels and collaborating. Like, that was a change in behavior from file shares and emails or attaching documents. It's the same principle. I think the nice thing with AI, particularly if you're a Teams shop, is that will just get more and more embedded into Teams. So one of the things I do a lot is, before my one-to-ones, I'll be like, what should I catch up with Lindsay on? And it'll just, give me half a dozen things over various chats and emails, like, these are things to talk about. And that stuff, once you start to use it, becomes more muscle memory.
Well, that's where, this is where, and Brandon Tamor said this when we were at the Cavell event this past week in New York.
Oh yeah, I want to hear about that event. Let's talk about that in a second.
I
didn't get to go because I was at UCX.
Yeah. It was a good show. I thought I think it was really helpful. There was a lot of really eager people there to understand what's Microsoft doing now, because I think their presence in that particular show has been more than previous years. There was quite a few Microsoft people at that show, and they were debuting some pretty interesting things that they were talking to us about as as a really close partner of Microsoft. So it was pretty cool. So from that perspective, it was really neat. His discussion about, he had a keynote, and his keynote was really about, we've got to get, Copilot embedded into Teams phones so that we can give businesses this clear picture of what's going on in the entirety of the business, right? Because we've got it in channels, you've got it in chat, you've got it in email, you've got it in everything written. But a large portion of how North America, let's just say, communicates still, and even Europe, is voice, right, on the phone. And so we're not capturing that sort of business intelligence just yet, because Copilot's not, really heavily embedded in Teams phone just yet. But I think it's coming. I think it will. Not
Yeah, you can do it on Teams phone now. You have to be in the app and you have to instantiate it each time, but it can be done right now. I think along those lines, I'm super bullish about it in contact center. Like, jumping around a bit, but this week, was it this week or Friday? Maybe this week, Microsoft announced the new consumer Copilot. So this is confusing because there's the Microsoft Copilot for consumers, for individuals, and they announced voice and vision in that. So voice is being able to talk back and forth with the Copilot, very natural language, and vision is it being able to look at your screen and interpret what's going on the screen. This isn't yet in enterprise, but obviously you can see where that's going. But the voice stuff is amazing. It's very natural language. It's very eloquent. So for contact center, both for what you just said there, Rick, the data gathering, the understanding, and the potential for agent scenarios in that world is huge.
Well, I have a real world example that just happened today. I can't say that it's Copilot, but I was in New York, obviously, for Cavell, and I got these expenses now. I got to go submit for reimbursement, and I go to grab my hotel invoice off a major chain of hotel brand, and no invoice. It said, this particular one, you got to call them, you got to ask for the invoice. I don't know why. So I call and I get a virtual assistant. You can tell it's a virtual assistant. And so I describe what I'm looking for. Hey, I just need an invoice. They say, well, give us the day you checked in. I gave them the date. It said, is this the hotel you checked into? Is this your reservation? I said, yes. And it said, great. I've submitted the request to the local hotel. Here's your reference number. They'll email you the invoice within 24 hours. And that was the extent of the conversation. Never talked to a human. I'm like, okay, that's the first time I've had a
That's
virtual
interesting.
experience.
Yeah, to have it.
Flawless.
And it was just talking to you.
It was just talking to me, and I was talking to it, just regular language. Just, I wasn't trying to.
It's not, those scenarios are not really that hard. I mean, it's working with a back-end system. It will have some kind of rails about what it can and can't do. If it's unsure, it will escalate you to a human. But you think about, again, contact center or that kind of use case, 50%, 60%, you could say higher, are the same thing again and again. Opening hours, where's my order? How do I do a return? I don't know where my thing is. Like, that stuff is really, close, if not there now, to do with AI. So that's cool to hear it in the real world.
Yeah. I'm going to share my dream scenario here, Tom, just because we're talking contact center, we're talking AI. And this is just something that I think would be really, really interesting. And I was actually explaining it, to Mark Vail earlier today. And I think
on your team now, exciting. Great
Mark Vail and Satish would have very sort of well-known MVPs on our team. Very excited to have them. It's amazing. So let me give you this scenario that I think is pretty interesting from a business perspective, because I look at business today, take that mid-market. So that organization, Brandon, you're talking about, massive change, probably a Fortune 1,500 company, lots and lots of resources to go do things, right? You take that mid-market, those resources aren't as prevalent and nor is Microsoft as prevalent in the mid-market as they are in the global sort of organizations, right? That's so you look at this and you go, okay, it'd be nice to have a contact center, a Teams-driven contact center, and really have visual agents. And I say visual agents, I've got 25 virtual agents sitting there. Now, it's really one agent. We know it's one agent. It's one virtual, it's AI. But it'd be nice to be able to label those agents. I've got Tom, Sally, Paul, Mark, all of them working, and maybe they work 24/7, whatever it may be. They don't take restroom breaks, all that good stuff. And it'd be nice to be able to have them built into a contact center with real people, because I don't see businesses at this point yet going, fully like, okay, let me just replace my contact center with AI. It's not going to
No,
happen.
there has to
You
be
got
escalation
supervisors,
paths from there.
escalation path. So you keep the real people as part of the escalation path, right? And then you've got 25 users up front that are all named, but I can see their stats in the call center just like I would see if it was an agent, a normal agent in the call center, right? It would be cool to be able to manage my contact center in a contact center platform with escalation points that I have, you know, that are real, and then have the value or have the utilization and the statistics to show how they're handling, having the sentiment analysis on every single call running through, right? What did that feel like? How was that interaction? That would be killer because I feel like that bridges the gap between businesses today and businesses in the next 5 to 7 years.
Oh,
Yeah, I
Rick,
think. Okay,
Rick,
come on, Brandon.
I'm just gonna spoil it for you, and I can't say too much because I think it's NDA. But there is a big contact center coming with that feature pretty soon. So you're gonna see it. You're gonna see it.
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
pretty cool.
the interesting thing with the visualization of that is how you're thinking about it, because it's like, I mean, theoretically, the AI is only limited to the concurrent channels you've got. Like that's the only thing. Whether it's one AI instance and you consider it multiple instances or not. The other piece of the puzzle that's super interesting is how people are going to commercialize and charge for this. Like, is it, as you just said, I've got 20, so I've got 20 virtual agents. That's the way a lot of the big contact centers have gone, actually, is they want to monetize the concept of like a concurrent agent or a concurrent call because they used to have or do have a concurrent seat count license. The other way to go at it is a cost per interaction or a cost per success, and that's really interesting because actually is it I give, you know, the vendor $2 every time a human doesn't have to engage, and I don't if the human has to engage. So there's a few different ways to slice this that will be really interesting to play out.
So that seems to me like the consumption model to me is a bit like, from a business perspective, what's my consumption going to look like? You know, how does that compare to my cost for people and things like that? So you look at that, and that's a bit of a, you know, kind of a, I don't know, up in the air, don't know what the answer is going to look like. But in the agent space, if I'm paying for 25 concurrent calls or 50 concurrent agents, that seems to me like that'd be pretty simple to break down. Okay, great. And then, you know, I understand what my cost savings are. I can really go show the business what the cost savings are for something like this.
Yeah, lots of like traditional businesses like fixed cost model, even if it's theoretically more expensive because they know what the costs are for sure. It's interesting. Amazon Connect is entirely consumption based, and they've been pushing into the contact center space with consumption, and it's interesting to see who will and won't do that model. But to your point, Rick, I can be like, I need maximum of 10 virtual concurrent agents and it's this cost a month. A lot of businesses are like that.
Huh. That's going to be pretty exciting. Like, I think this is such an exciting world for the CX space. So speaking of the CX space, we got a couple things from the Microsoft ecosystem, right? We've got the Queues app in Teams. We've got queue callbacks. Let's touch on the queue callbacks.
Yep.
That's in the normal queues. And then we'll leave D365 out of it. That's higher end at this point, so we'll leave that out of it. But
you guys don't need me anymore. You're all over this. You know, the features, you know, the steps. Yes. So like we've got, yeah, you're right. We've got
the buzzwords, Tom.
That's what you need. It's a buzzword.
This high. It's a surface level, Tom. Surface level.
So yeah, you're right. So we've got queues and auto attendance built into Teams. So there's some basic kind of routing functionality built in there. What Microsoft are in preview now and imminently will release is Queues app, which is part of Teams Premium, and that's building on top of the queues and auto attendance with a more visual interface with supervisors and agents with some reporting. So it's very contact center light, and it's part of Teams Premium. So Teams Premium is list $10 per user per month, currently on offer for $7, I think, in most markets. So that's really interesting because that's in the box, same UI, same experience, just slightly more features. Then you step into, if you want a bit more, into the ecosystem contact centers that are certified for Teams, that work tightly with Teams. And then you said, Rick, you go right up to a Dynamics 365 kind of $120, $150 a seat type high-end contact center. So there's a range of capabilities there. And the nice thing is, as a Teams organization, you might have some use cases that are entirely in the box, some that Q's app deals with nicely, some where you step up to ecosystem. You could mix and match depending on your organization's requirements.
Do you see at some point the Q's app becoming omni-channel? Seems like me like there's not a lot to add there to make it omni-channel.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, conceptually it could, and Microsoft are using, a combination of they're using Teams on the back end for the Q's app. Omnichannel would be more the Azure communication services or more what Dynamics is doing. The real question there is how much they want to cannibalize the Dynamics play by putting it all into Teams. I mean, $7 to $10 is not a lot for those contact center features. So I think at some point they'll stop just because they want to step customers up to the big boy contact center for those use cases. So will omnichannel get into queues? I don't know. Conceptually, it could. I think at the moment it's ecosystem play for sure.
But there's a oh, go ahead, Brandon.
I was going to say, I had a conversation with a couple of Microsoft guys, and at the time, obviously maybe they don't know what they don't know yet, but the appetite for that was pretty low. When I asked that question, it was, hey, we really don't have any interest in getting into that omni-channel, outside of maybe a little tighter CRM integrations for things like, third-party CRMs. Does that open the door for other omni-channel opportunity? Maybe, but at least at the time when I asked them, this was just maybe 3 weeks ago, they said right now we have no appetite for that.
That's what's interesting though, right? Because I look at this, Tom, and I go, okay, think about kind of our trajectory as an organization, okay? And I think about, great, the Q's app's an amazing play for us. It doesn't add any, hardly any cost for a customer to go, enable some critical features that they need, right? And then you look at the other end of the spectrum and you've got D365 that sits at, $125 a user, but you need licensing that's like Copilot. You need some other, so you're like at $200 a user by the time you get all the licensing.
Plus all the pro serve to kind of hang it together.
Plus the pro service to get it up.
Yeah, it's a big
manage
big
it. Yeah. So I feel like that's a high end organization that's going to have D365. And you've got this so this middle space between $10. I'm going to use pricing as the segmentation here, because you go from $10 to $100, you got a lot of features that are accessible by an ISV or by a partner like us to go build. I mean, that's where your Luers come in. That's where your Landises come in. That's where all these guys sort of come in. And you look at those
exactly.
guys,
they're in that kind of $30 to $60, $70 place, and those ISVs are more agile, more customer responsive. Often they'll go into, like, Luware have a whole automate power apps kind of extension to go into line of business stuff. They're the ones experimenting with the AI at the moment, and they're more hungry and more aggressive to add features than the very big contact centers as well. So yeah, you're right. There's a lot to play with there, and I think there'll be some consolidation. Like, there's so many contact center vendors at the moment. I think we're at 20 certified ones. That I don't think the market can forever sustain 20.
on the enable side. On the enable
no,
side,
so that includes connect and enable. So connect and extend. Sorry. So fewer extend. I think it's about 7. But I think there'll be some roll ups. There'll be some buys. But the contact center market is kind of where UC was 6 years ago. Like, there's still, most seats are on-prem, most seats are traditional. There's a lot to go to the cloud. I think this AI thing, it can't really be done on-prem, so it'll drive those seats to the cloud as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting space, because I do think that the contact center seats, the volume of seats, the velocity of seats, I think is going to, if you look at that mid-market, and I say real seats by people. I think that number is going to come down. I think because as AI starts to handle more and more interactions, I feel like that if
you're mid-market, there's so much value. If you can hand off, even if it's just handing off opening hours and basic questions like that, like you say, the big orgs probably already have multiple 100-seat contact center. Yes, they'll shave some savings, but if you can say to a 100-user org, actually, we can hive 30% of your calls away, that they really can feel the value.
Huge value there. Huge value. Well, I'm interested in that space a lot. I think there's a lot going on from a product perspective at Momentum. There's a lot going on from just kind of the future direction of what we do. Team's phone right now is we're fast and furious at our go-to-market strategy. That's been working out really well.
Well,
And
Q's
we're
is
looking
interesting
to
on that
scale.
front as well, because Q's might be the compelling reason to go to Team's phone. Actually, it's like, well, actually, we can bring you a contact center light experience that meets your business requirements, and actually, that's a compelling reason to just jump in with the cloud now and move it all over.
Yeah, I see that from my perspective as we're talking to that SMB and maybe smaller enterprise. I think that's where the Q's app will win the deal. Is how many conversations, Rick, have we been in where the customer says, I don't want the 5.9s or the Genesis. I don't need that, but Teams just doesn't. It could be the call queue callback feature that's now available. Could be the Q's app that gives them a little more feature functionality around supervisor agent control and whisper barge and that kind of stuff. I absolutely agree with you, Tom. It's going to be what helps us win probably a lot more deals with just those little feature value apps.
You're right, because now they can go replace their ShoreTel that they had with the contact center that was in ShoreTel. They can go replace their MyTel, right? That they had little contact center in MyTel. They can go replace their Cisco with whatever the Cisco. I forgot the Cisco is not ECCR, but whatever the Cisco. Maybe it is ECCR.
Express version.
Yeah. There you go. So you can go replace those things, right? And achieve the agent supervisor sort of supervision, the statistics that rolls out under those queues, right? And those users. And then the Q's callback. You layer on the Q's callback, and now you've got pretty complete calling contact center, right? Solution.
Yep. And in the cloud, work from anywhere, bring the numbers in from the cloud, like all the value, DR resiliencies, all work from anywhere, so you get all that upside as well.
And one fun random tidbit, just so our listeners hear this, and I'm going to brag a little bit on Mark Vail because he'll do things, and I'm like, where'd that come from? But brilliant things, right? So Q's app goes public preview, and of course him and I jump on and we're like, let's do this. And so Tom, you probably saw I put a post out there. I don't know if Mark Vail has put his post out yet or if he's still working on it. But Mark Vail goes and takes the kind of that real-time data that comes off the Q's app. It's exportable, and he goes and builds a Power BI cradle to grave for calls. I'm like, dang, you want to talk about like taking that next step of, hey, it'd be nice to see what the call journey was across this data. So he goes and builds this visual call journey based on the data that's provided through the Q's app. That's good thinking right there.
So he built a Power BI template to visualize that.
Grave. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Shout out to Mark if you're listening.
Go Mark Vail.
I'm going to text him for a demo afterwards.
Okay, I think let's add real quick. Is there anything that we didn't cover? Because I know we needed to cut this one short today a little bit. We started a bit late.
Yeah, no, I know we want to get into places. It'd be worth just briefly talking about on the phone side, the survival branch appliance. So Microsoft have done a ton of work on this. So this is a physical box, a SBC, a gateway you can put on site. And in the event your internet goes down, providing you've got obviously separate telephony connectivity, so you've got different physical or different circuit, your phone can carry on running. They've added all sorts of things, so being able to reroute call queues and auto attendants, being able to fall back VoIP calls to PSDN, doing call forward, hold, etc. So the phone functionality you'd expect on site, and there's some more work being done here. So right now, this is limited based on how long your phone or user is authenticated. So it can be up to 24 hours, but it could be less depending on your authentication cycle. There's more work being done here. So our survivability story is progressively getting a lot stronger for the businesses that need it.
And speaking of survivability, wasn't one of the features that at least I thought I heard talking to some guys at Cavell at this last New York Cavell event, also allowing peer-to-peer calling, meaning you're on Teams, I'm on Teams, we're in the same location, and I can still call you Teams to Teams.
That's right, yeah. So in the office, if we click the call, it will kind of reroute and then find each other. So if you've got like a multi-floor office or whatever, you can carry on working internally. Yep.
Yeah, which is pretty big. And I think the other interesting thing from Momentum's perspective is obviously socializing with Microsoft. That today, this is a kind of a direct routing setup, but working towards it becoming an Operator Connect value add, hopefully down the road. I know Microsoft is considering that, so I'm eager to hear what they do with that.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting use case.
Brandon, do we go GA with the Virgin Islands and that sort of extended calling footprint yet in Operator Connect?
That's a good question. This is totally random, but yeah, Tom, we extended out into the Caribbean. I know we were running the 7-day test over a week ago. I don't know if we're GA yet.
I can check the Power BI report and tell you. If
There
you
you
like.
go. Live.
I see. I knew that was going to happen there. And I think we're fast and furious, Tom, at building out the rest of the I think our 75 country footprint. That's DR. We're fast at sort of onboarding the rest of the countries onto OC. So I think you'll see.
That's great.
We'll crank it to the top.
There's been a real tear on some providers adding their countries to OC now. So we're up to 100 countries covered and 103 providers. So great for customers to have multiple options, and kind of all the OC providers, obviously including yourselves, are certified and approved and directly integrated to Microsoft. So yeah, really good for customers.
Yep.
Good stuff. Okay. Anything else, guys? I think we covered a bunch there. Like there was a whole lot that we just kind of covered, but in a natural language sort of LLM kind of way.
Yeah. We always have stuff to talk about, don't we? I mean, the only thing we should probably touch on is places, if we want to cover that before we wrap up.
Oh, yeah.
So places is super interesting. This is Microsoft's kind of room booking, wayfinding, new ways of working kind of tool. So it doesn't quite fit in a single box, but think about hybrid meeting bookings and saying we want the right location for the right booking. We want to tell people we're meeting physically or meeting virtually. We want to find our way to a room in an office. All these kind of things, that you might have seen some of it from like a Condeco type scenario or others. We've now got, this has been kind of in preview for about a year. We've now got details that it will be GA Q4, so this quarter. It will start rolling out November, and there's going to be some functionality right in core Office 365 / Microsoft 365, and for the fancy features, so things like any intelligence, AI, and analytics, that will be part of Premium, which is part of Teams Premium. So a bit early to get into the weeds on this, but look out around the Ignite timeframe for lots more around places.
Yeah, and we actually saw a demo at Cavell. It looks really intriguing, and for me, I'm mostly a remote employee now, so maybe it doesn't provide a ton of value to me, but to the hybrid companies, and Momentum is a hybrid company, there is a lot of value there. And I think back to a previous lifetime where I sat kind of next to a headquarters, but I still worked in a hybrid, 3 days on, 2 days home, where there would be times I'd be at home, and all of a sudden, some executive would be calling me saying, "Hey, we're in the conference room. Where are you?" I'd be like, "Oh no."
Oh, it was a physical. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, no, I was supposed to be in the office today. I missed the memo. So I see there's going to be huge value to these enterprises where, especially back to the AI component of maybe I'm working from home, and one morning I come in and I ask, AI, or maybe I don't have to ask, like, "Hey, summarize my day," and it says, "Hey, you've got these 3 meetings. We see that all these people are in this meeting room in the office. You might want to go to the office today."
That's exactly where it's going. Or like, I'm going to the office on Wednesday. Like, try and coordinate where should I be in the building relative to where my boss and my team are. Like that you're bang on with that use case. Is most people now are some form of X days in, X days out, and this lets them maximize the days in time to actually get physically in the right place and collaborate together.
Yeah, and I wonder, again, back to the previous life that I was at, they moved after pandemic, they moved their headquarters to another location smaller, and they set it up more like their own private co-working space. So now it's you check in for a desk, not just, so it becomes more of this big hot desking experience. And I think that's another probably huge value that Places provides is, to your point, where's my team checking in at? Can we coordinate it? Can we get in the same huddle group? That kind of thing.
Yeah, and then on the back end, the facilities team or the estate team understanding how the space is being used, how it isn't being used, how many floors do we need, what kinds of spaces do we need. I've seen a lot of places move to more collaborative spaces, because actually people are going into the office, they're specifically going in to meet each other, not to sit at a desk. So hot desks, you need some, but not hundreds of them. What they need is more 5 to 10 meeting room spaces, because those spaces are always in demand, but the hot desks are free, for example.
Yeah. One last comment that I thought when I was seeing the demo, I was like, oh, this is what is going to bust the coffee badgers. The people that get told they need to go back to the office, so they go badge in, go grab their coffee and head back home. I'm like, but they're going to power on their M365 suite when they get home, and Place is going to be like, oh,
yeah, it's going to be like you're back home. Yeah,
you're not actually in the office. And then all the analytics will feed up to
Yeah.
corporate.
yeah,
So
Those Amazon guys are going to have a hard time with that, aren't they?
yeah.
That's pretty funny. All right. Well, we covered a ton, Tom. I want to be respectful of the time. We appreciate you joining us on episode 74. There was a ton to talk about, and there's always a ton to talk about with you. So it's always really exciting to have you on, because you're everywhere, all over the Teams ecosystem and Microsoft ecosystem, and we get to learn a bunch from you. So that's pretty nice to have the opportunity to chat with you more and more. So
yeah, no, thanks for having me. It's nice to see the pod going from strength to strength as well. It's always a good conversation. You're pulling some real big guns onto the pod as well these days, which is great.
We do our best.
There you go. All right, everyone. Well, that's a wrap. Episode 74 with Tom Arbuthnot, and he's fresh off of UCX in London. And the next time you'll see you, what's the next show for you, Tom? Is it not Ignite? I'm sure there's more before that.
Yeah, there's a couple of regional ones, but Ignite is the next big one. So hopefully I'll be speaking, but either way, I'll definitely be there and be doing some stand stuff and some sessions. So yeah, if you're going, let me know. Where in the world is Tom Arbuthnot? That's going to be our poster that we're going to put up, and we'll put little pins where we see you.
That's right.
All right, very good, Tom. Hey, have a great evening. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great weekend, because it's Friday afternoon and it's time to go have a cocktail of some sort, I'm sure. So thanks so much for hanging out with us. We appreciate it. That's episode 74, and that's a wrap.
Thanks,
See you,
Tom.
everyone. Bye-bye.